today's guest is a Dominican friar, a drummer, and a presence of peace and wisdom on Instagram. Benedictusesdomine, aka Father Hyacinth Marie Cordell, OP. Since his very first post a year ago, he's been sharing reflections that resonate deeply with those seeking faith, beauty, and discipline in a noisy world. It's an honor to welcome him on the 1 year anniversary of his first post to talk about spirituality, music, ego, discipline, and more, and whatever you would also like to talk about, Father Hyacinth.
Well, thanks so much. And it's really great to connect with you and with others too, and to reflect over this last year. Just a quick thing. So a lot of times people get confused about my handle, so in my name. So a lot of people think I'm Father Benedict, but the handle is actually Benedictus es Domine. It's 3 words.
Right.
So it's Latin, and basically Benedictus is blessed. S means R, and then Domine means Lord. So it's basically blessed are you, Lord, in Latin. So Benedictus es Domine, but my name is Father Hyacinth. A lot of people think I'm Father Benedict, but I'm actually not. So that's the story there. So
I really appreciate that because I did a ranking video on yourself and I was a bit nervous about doing it because we know each other. But I gave my honest opinion on it and I literally have given you the wrong title. I knew that obviously you were Father Hyacinth from my perspective. However, I said it completely wrong. Benedictusesdomine, I must have said about 60 times. Can you just tell me one more time how to say it?
sure, Benedictus es Domine.
That sounds so much better. So I apologize.
No problem.
Great intro. Thank you so much. Because I was going to ask you, how have I pronounced that correctly? So that's already done. Thank you so much.
Well,
Um,
there's a lot of confusion out there, so I might as well just clarify it for people here. So.
now you've spoken a lot about rhythm and discipline in spiritual life. I work with children who have ADHD, autism, and I find that the consistency, compassion, routine are incredibly powerful and also kind of hard to maintain. How do you personally approach discipline as a spiritual practice?
As a spiritual practice, I think of discipline as, focus and working hard at something, and for us, it's a virtue.
Yeah.
So, the way I think about, a lot of times we don't talk about virtue these days. A lot of parents aren't necessarily talking to their children about character and virtue, and it's not taught in school. There are various reasons for that, but I think we need to get back to a lot of that. And I think of moral character just on the secular, from the secular view. Moral character is like, in one word or one phrase, what a good person is. But moral character is made up of a lot of virtues.
Mm.
So like it's like the diamond is moral character, and all the facets are virtues.
It's very
So
interesting.
good person, that's like the unifying concept, right? Or in the Old Testament, it's the just man. In New Testament, it's holiness. In you can say, from a more philosophical standpoint, it's moral character. It's or being a good person. You can put it in different ways, but that's sort of the unifying concept. But a good person, a holy person, right, is someone that has these qualities, who's patient, who listens well, who prays, who loves God, who loves others, who's disciplined, right? So discipline would be one of the facets of the diamond, right? So many virtues that we're called to have and exhibit. And it's all those facets together, working together, that is something really beautiful. And ultimately, through God's grace, that's what a saint is. A saint is like a diamond that fully shines forth and inspires others, right? Reflecting his own beauty and love.
I love that. That's a very intricate answer, and just something to follow up on it. So, how do you maintain the consistency? For example, in your drum life, if motivation drops, how do you kind of stay kind to yourself as well in those moments? And also, just a side question. Sorry to go over it in depth, but it seems as if you've got the kind of the morality without spirituality. You see morals as something which is maybe part of life, not just part of spirit.
Yes. Well, so yeah. So apart from faith, whether somebody's I think there are certain morals that are universal. And the way we Christians, Catholics often see morals is so you can talk with an atheist about a lot of qualities like being patient and generous and things like that, and a lot of them will agree to those kinds of qualities. So we can find some common ground there. We think of ourselves as trying to have something deeper, not because of ourselves, but because of God, that He wants to take the water of life and the water of natural virtues and to change it into wine so that it's not just living a good life on our way to death. It's living in relationship with God in His friendship and reflecting His love on our way to eternal life, to be at home with Him forever, right? So it's much deeper. It's water changed into wine, right? It isn't just the water, right?
That's very insightful. No, I appreciate that. And so you can apply that in the context of um, being on the drum kit as well, doing
Oh
something
yeah.
which is morally wholesome, maybe, or doing something which I suppose I'm going to come to this a little bit later, so I don't want to delve too deep into it. But so with relation to that, how do you kind of maintain the consistency of the motivation? Now, it kind of ties in, and it's kind of a little bit tenuous, but I presume it's using faith as well with the drums, maybe, perhaps.
Yeah, I think well, discipline is needed in lots of areas of life. I think of it as discipline actually, it's hard, it's not easy, but it helps us to become better, right? So it's hard to focus on something, it's hard to practice. This is kind of a typical thing when kids are younger, they don't want to practice. They just want to have fun, right? If they're on a
Yeah.
piano, banging keys or they're on drums, they're just hitting stuff. It's really hard to convince a kid to actually sit there and practice because it's kind of boring, right? But then if you have to somehow try to, sway the kid over to thinking about if you practice, then you can actually do a lot more and actually have more fun, right? It's not easy, but it's worth it. Like there's no way you're going to play soccer like Messi, without discipline. There's no way you're going to succeed in this world and do well and in whatever facet without discipline. You're going to have to work hard at something, but you become better through it. So in John chapter 15, Jesus uses the example or the image of, he says, you are the vine, I am the branches, but every branch that bears fruit, my Father prunes so that it might bear more fruit. So, so discipline, seen in the right way, we shouldn't see it just as negative, but it's a means to flourishing, right? To flourishing more, and so it's part of that difficult means to get to a better place.
Yeah, that's perfect, and that resonates with me completely when I was younger. Getting on the drum kit and listening to my teacher what he said, and he was a lovely man. He gave me 2 hours, not an hour. He was my friend's uncle, and he was talking to me about politics and spirituality and everything. We got really deep into it. It'd send me away. I'd be full of motivation, and then for the next week, I'd just try and replicate some metal drums that I heard that I couldn't play. And it was only till later I established, oh, actually, you get more out of it from the hard parts of it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and you know very well it's kind of a balance because there are people that are there are so every once in a while you find somebody who's very disciplined, but they're not having fun along the way, right? And it's maybe too serious. And so it's like you need a little bit of time to kind of have fun, try different things, play around with the kit, explore, but then you need to get back to practicing too. So it's sort of the back and forth, right?
Yeah, and it reminds me a little bit of life in general.
Yes.
Yeah. So, do you have any advice for people who are struggling to manage specifically ego in the modern world, especially with everything kind of pushing towards, like for example, social media, self-promotion, comparison, constant visibility. So, do you have any advice about anyone that's struggling to maintain and be grounded?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think faith really helps there because with faith, we realize we're not the be all and end all. We're not God, right? And there's something greater than us. And so we're seeking to, to glorify Him and to reflect something greater. And we're just, we all have unique gifts and strengths. And, you know, when we should love ourselves, we should want ourselves to flourish and to succeed and all of that. That's great. But when ego comes in, I think it's too much, and then it's to the detriment of other people. Whereas we really should want all boats to sort of rise, and we should want everyone to flourish, spiritually, humanly, in every way. And I think if we're going about it in that way, then it's much better. Even competition is not necessarily always bad. The way I think about it, there's a type of competition in which I want me to win and I want you to lose. That's not great competition. But if you say I want to compete, and sure, I'm competing to win, but I want all of us to improve together and to right the rising tide for all boats. So I think that's the better way to approach it. And with us drummers, we shouldn't want to be the greatest in the world, right? There is no greatest. There are all kinds of drummers that can do all things that other drummers can't or not in the same way. And but it's to each, for God and His grace and goodness, and it's a unique voice for each to flourish in their own way. And it's beautiful when you see them all, right?
It's the best. It really is. I think the best thing I've seen about being on social media. I mean, you've been on a year and you've achieved so much. And honestly, I just like to say I'm so proud of you because I can see how it can affect some people, and your humility is just 10 out of 10. You're always building people up. You're a very significant part, I think, in a lot of people's lives more than you maybe think. Um, and so how did you, was it the same with you with regards to the spiritual side, keeping your ego kind of under wraps, and especially as your platform grew?
Yes, I mean, the ego is something we all are struggling with. I tell people openly, so pride is the greatest sin, and it's also the most subtle. We can have pride even when we do good things. And you know, it and I just tell people openly, every time I go to confession, I always mention pride because it's always going to be there. And I think everybody should. So it's either we're working on it, either we're working on our pride or against it, with God's grace and other helps, or we're feeding into it. So it's better to be aware of it and be working on it than not. So yeah, so we all, and it reminds me of T.S. Eliot. He wrote a famous work called Murder in the Cathedral. It's a play, and it's really brilliant. But so St. Thomas Becket, it's based on history, right? When he was, you know, when he was made archbishop, right, and he was he basically underwent this conversion. He was kind of a worldly man before, so he underwent this conversion, and then you see these various tempters come and tempt him, and they're no longer able to really sway him at all because he's had a deeper conversion. So he's able to fend off the tempters easily enough. But then the last tempter comes. It's the temptation of pride. And it's basically saying, you've done everything well. You are great. You are a saint, right? And he begins to struggle with that one. It's sort of, so we'll be dealing with our own ego all our lives. And it's better to be aware of it and to work against it and constantly work on it. It's not just a one done thing, right? Humility is something that we have to work on. And life has a way of humbling us, right? All kinds of things have a way of humbling us. But it's a difference between humiliation and shaming and treating ourselves as a doormat. That's not true humility, but true humility where it's just accepting who we are with our blessings and gifts and also our weaknesses, and trying to see ourselves in the right perspective, right? And to see ourselves in light of God, to see ourselves in light of others, and not to have an exaggerated sense of self in relationship to others or God.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's a really good answer. Thank you for that. Okay, so I've seen, we're getting a bit more to the drum related topics.
Sure.
That I mean, you post a lot about rhythm. Your rhythms themselves, speak for themselves. And when I watch something of you, I can never kind of get over. I've mentioned this in a video I've done about it before, but I can never get over the music, like the musicality, the rhythmic the polyrhythms. And I don't know. I find it, could it be comparable to sort of a spiritual insight? Do you remember when you experienced that kind of revelation through rhythm, for example?
Yeah, I think I mean I think about the preconditions to music. You have to have this amazing universe like we have today. You have to have an atmosphere with sound waves to travel. All these things are like in nature. Everything is sort of in there in potential. And so what we human beings with our and we have to have a rational soul and an intellect, rationality, a sense of beauty and aesthetics. All of that has to be preconditions for music and drumming. And so when there's something that touches your soul musically, there's something sublime there, and it's kind of pointing to something spiritual, that it's beyond just the material. It's like when you see a beautiful tree, you can describe that scientifically, and I love science. You can describe, all the biology and everything, but it doesn't explain why it moves us so much, right? And
Yeah, exactly. There's no real science on that.
yeah, and why is it to think about like people devote their whole lives to music because they're moved by music. It touches their soul. And so in my mind, it's just like music is a reflection of God, ultimately the author of all beauty. And it's like there's like getting a little reflection of that beauty and they're captivated by it and they devote their whole lives to it. To me, I think it's puzzling if they're getting it's easy for us to get so caught up in the ray of light, but not to trace it back to its source. All of this should make us think about this ultimate infinite source of all beauty, and the cause and end of all beauty and the universe and ourselves. And so to me, it's all connected. It's not everybody sees it that way in a secular society, right? But I think there's like a lack of vision or completeness when people don't.
Yeah, and I actually agree with you completely. I think there's an element to life that can get assessed from a certain point of view, which not necessarily needs explanations, but it needs understanding, if that makes any kind of sense whatsoever. Understanding from a different perspective, which isn't the material, the superficial, and as we live and breathe here on this planet, for example. So, just sticking around the kind of rhythm topic as well. Again, I've mentioned polyrhythms. So I'm very impressed by your polyrhythmic ability. Is that something? So you need a lot of discipline to be able to play a polyrhythm. That's what I've noticed. When I first found out, there's like a code to it almost. But there's some polyrhythms where it's a repetitive ostinato, which I find the hardest. If you think of a polyrhythm, I'll work out a chart and go, they go together, that one goes there, there's an extra one, and kind of do it via numerics. But when you're doing your ostinato and then the flow, how do you kind of decide on what you're going to do once the ostinato's down? Is it through feel? Is it through anyway, you understand what I'm saying. How do you work that out?
Yes. So I sort of got I was attracted to ostinatos and playing over ostinatos through Terry Bozzio.
Oh,
He's
great drummer.
Yeah, I mean he had a series back in the 90s. I had VHS tapes back in the day.
Yeah, me too.
And I think it's melodic drumming in the ostinato, and it's like three videos. And when I heard him play, I think that was Terry Bozzio at his peak. And those videos, they're amazing. And so I was mesmerized by that. And so he was like my drumming hero through much of high school. I mean, I had many, many, many other influences too, all the greats. But I loved that kind of the aspect. I noticed today at a lot of Instagram videos, there's what's very popular is linear drumming, right? There's a lot of linear stuff, whether all this, intricate stuff, 30-second notes between the hi-hat and the snare. And I think it's very cool. I like it. But after a while, when you hear so much of it, it's like in fad right now and it's very popular. Or you have the gospel chop stuff, and that is incredibly impressive. And the gospel chop drummers, they're some of the best in the world. So all that's interesting. So I love linear stuff. I wrote a drumming book like a year and a half ago over a Christmas break, which at some point I'll try to publish and just make accessible. It's called Linear Horizons, so it's all kind of on linear drumming. And I was looking for a book like this out there, and I didn't find anything, so I wrote it.
Well, I definitely want a copy of that if I'm honest, Father. Hyacinth, that's okay. I'll get one of those.
Yeah, I'd like to get a few endorsements first and then begin to promote it. And I think I'm just going to make it available for free, a web free website, because I know, people struggle these days and just to make something available, not everything has to be about money, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so, um, so that's like a huge realm, which is awesome to explore. And you'll notice I do a lot of linear stuff too. And I love that. And there's a lot more to explore in that whole realm. So I find that But sometimes I find that the linear drumming that I see out there is kind of limited to a certain way or style, and it's really great. I mean, people do really amazing work in that realm. But I just think of there's so much else that could be said and expressed, even in linear drumming. And so I've tried to explore that kind of thing. We could talk more about that. But then another whole realm is ostinatos, and that isn't done as much. There are some drummers out there that are really good at this kind of thing. Johnny Mothar.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Phenomenal. So he's just on another level. Um, Thomas Lang, Alex Cohen. I mean, they're doing things at such an advanced level. It's hard to believe it's even possible. But that's a whole nother interesting realm too. Now, if you think about it, even a simple rock beat has an ostinato,
Yeah.
right? With the eighth notes
Mm.
or 16th notes or quarter notes, right? That's something you keep going and you learn to do snare and kick patterns over the top of it, sometimes throwing the hi-hat. But people don't think of it as an ostinato, right? But the jazz, when you're learning all the jazz patterns and going through all the permutations, the spangalang, right? That's an ostinato. So with ostinatos, and most things are in 4 and 3. So it's really important that somebody learn all the permutations, um, and of 4s and 3s. So I mean that's what I learned from Terry Bozzio very simply is you get an ostinato going and then you just have to learn, you have to start simple and just do something, do simple patterns over the top of it. And then you just go through the permutations. Like if you're doing triplets, you want to play on you first play, say I'm like the St. Peter shuffle, I call it, at the left hand, right? Say you're trying to learn that. And you're trying to do stuff over the top of it. So you just first start with, say, with the right hand, just hitting the first of the triplet partial, right? And then just getting comfortable with that. And then the second, while keeping the other one going. Once you get comfortable with that, you go to the third, right? And then you do the first and the second partial, the second and the third, the first and the third, right? And then you can start doing it with the kick. So, and you see how it feels. And at some point, you're going to get tripped up with something, and that's okay. That's actually highlighting a place where you need to slow down and put a little more time and work into that. Um, so, so basically with ostinatos, it's always the same thing. You have to get familiar with the ostinato, get comfortable with that, be able to play that, and then you just start simple, playing things over the top of it. You go through all the permutations, and then you start mixing them up, and then you start combining. And then when it comes to like orchestrations and musical ideas, it's just a lot of times I'm just practicing, but I try to combine practice and musicality.
Yeah.
There's an exercise. I don't have much time to practice, believe it or not.
I don't know how you managed to do what you do.
But I learned a lot of these fundamentals long ago. So I put in a lot of practice years ago. So I don't have to put in a ton of practice now. I can learn things somewhat quickly. Well, to a certain degree, right? If I'm going to do something like Johnny Mothar, that's going to take but I just do a little bit at a time. Like I did kind of my own version of a Johnny Mothar beat, but that took a few weeks to just get used to things and try to. So
Is that the 2/3 progressive revelation?
no, it was like you're accenting every 3 with the right note with the right hand,
Right.
but then the beat there's a beat with the kick and the snare in 7, So you're playing the 3 over the 7, and then you're playing the hi-hat every 4/16 notes, and it alternates between opening and closing, right? So that was tough. And
Yeah.
I had to write things out to see where and I just had to work at one measure of a time at a time, and it's really tough to put all that together. But I just kept on working at it, until something that's not comfortable becomes more comfortable, and it's still imperfect, but you get better. A lot of times what I do when I practice, so most of the times when I practice, it's only like maybe 2, 3 times a week where it's after night prayer, like it's late at night. I sneak into our parish hall and I have to keep things very quiet so I don't wake anybody up. So that's why I've learned to mute things, mute drums, mute cymbals. That's one reason I've done a lot of stacks originally, was just to keep things quieter. But then after a while, you're like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I'm going to use that in a musical idea. But so I keep things very quiet. And what I try to do is, because I don't have a lot of time to practice, I always need to kind of keep up on singles and doubles, right? And so to keep the wrists moving, to get the singles and to get strong, and to keep one's strength up. I'll just do singles with, you could just do singles with one hand. You could do it with two hands alternating, but I try to incorporate a lot of things all at once because I don't have time. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll play like triplets in one hand and eighth notes in the other, and it's basically just this pattern. Now, if you do that fast, you can notice the right hand's going quicker than the left hand. So you're still working the left hand, but the right hand's working a little more.
Mm.
And so you're kind of but then you switch. So it's like you're giving the left hand a break, but not completely, by doing eighth notes while the other is doing triplets. And you're also practicing a polyrhythm at the same time, but then you switch.
Yeah.
So then your left hand's doing more of the work and your right hand's getting a break. And then what I do is throw in the bass drum in between the whatever hand is doing the triplets. So that way I'm working my bass drum in singles. So I'm giving my foot a workout all at the same time. And and then you can throw in the hi-hat as if you want to, but so that's one way that I just practice singles instead of just practicing, just single strokes over it. I'm doing single strokes, polyrhythms, working in the foot as well, right and left hand, giving the other a break while I'm working on one hand. And then I'll just like orchestrate it as I'm doing that pattern. I'll orchestrate it around the set to try to do something musically so it isn't so boring. So I just don't sit there doing the same pattern over again. So then I'm working on orchestration and musicality all at the same time. So now with doubles, then what I do with doubles is I think the best way to work on doubles is shuffles. Because with a shuffle, you have to pick up the second note, right? And
Mm.
that's doing a proper double. They're the cheated doubles where they're not using their fingers or engaging them, and they're just did it, right? But to do it properly, you got to pick up that second note with your fingers, and there's a certain wrist. A lot of people are at the beginning have a really hard time figuring out how to do a double correctly. But I think one of the best ways to do it to kind of get there is through practicing shuffles.
Mm.
And that's really a great way of just practicing doubles. So I just have a shuffle ostinato with my right hand. Now I also want to practice doubles with my feet. But instead of just putting them together like that, if this was the foot and the hand, what I'll do is I'll play the first. So the shuffle is like the first and the third triplet partial, right? What I'll do at the bass drum is play on the second and third partial. So that way my bass drum is practicing doubles. But I think it's better with triplets than say if you were practicing bass drum kick doubles in a grouping of four, if playing on 1 and 2 and resting on 3 and 4, that works, but you're waiting. It's not as much of a workout because you're waiting 2 notes before you come back in. Whereas with a triplet, you're only waiting 1 note, so it's more of a workout. So if you're doing this shuffle, right? Then you're working on your doubles with one hand. Then you get the foot, you're working on the doubles, and then I start to improvise and play over the top of that with the other hand. So then you're practicing all these things together, and then I'll switch. I'll do the shuffle with the left hand. So that's basically that's how I one way I practice. And so that's how I started doing the shuffle with the left hand. Then all of a sudden one time I started opening, I tried to experiment with opening the hi-hat. So then all of a sudden this pattern comes to me where and it's very that's what I call the St. Peter shuffle. And it's so difficult because you're closing the hi-hat with the left foot on the second partial. And
Yeah.
to keep that as an ostinato and do things over the top of it was really tough. But it sounds so cool that it was like, and this is a whole new possibility to work on. So I want to work on this. And even though it's tough, and like at first I thought, why would I ever do this? It's too tough to work on. But then I thought, no, it's this would be cool. I can hear all these cool beats over the top of this pattern. And it's kind of fun to work on something new and to do something different, right? So that's how it happened. I'm practicing doubles, doubles by doing shuffles with my left hand. And then, you can various things with your kick, but if you're practicing doubles of some kind, then you can start to do different things with the right hand. So you're you're going through permutation. So that's how I think is how can I all at the same time within a short period of time, practice singles, doubles, polyrhythms, musicality, have fun, all at the same time. And that's one way. And then some ideas will just emerge. I
Yeah.
don't often sit down and think, I'm going to come up with a new beat today, right? It's usually I'm just playing. Sometimes I'm just jamming and having fun, and all of a sudden some a new idea comes up, or I'll play something. I'm like, oh, that was cool. I should go back and develop that. But I can't plan it. I'm just trying to. I'm not. I'm just trying to have fun. Now, sometimes like the creative juices are flowing and they're just one idea after another is coming. And then I'm like, okay, I need to work on all those. And then we'll make those all into like an Instagram video or something like that to share with people. Other times it's like there's nothing there. And it's like, okay, that's fine. I'll just practice. So then I'll just practice my singles, doubles, and other things, different patterns. Um, and so then, because another day the creativity will kind of come back, and I don't worry about it. I don't depend it on. I'm not a professional musician, so I'm just having fun with it. I don't worry too much. I have no idea what I'm going to do next usually. So, but usually on my day off, which is Friday, then I get to play drums more openly for a little bit. Although there's a lot a lot of demands that come up even on my day off. But that's where I'm able to play more openly and then, experiment and have a little more fun. And that's when I usually record videos is maybe there might be one, two, three ideas that I've been working on. And then I'll take a little time to just play those. You do a few takes, record, try to take the best one and then upload it.
That's remarkable. I love that insight, because I always wondered how it came about, but it just turns out you're super efficient. You're just practicing, it's just a practice session. So that works though. Sometimes I found that some of the best things that come out happen by accident.
Right.
So you mentioned Terry Bozzio, and that kind of takes us nicely to what I was going to ask next was, um, so you've talked before again, I'm sure you've talked about being open to various music genres. Um, yeah, so you've played, I mean, I've done a lot of metal and some pop and rock and stuff. So do you think there's any space for those genres then in even the more like kind of aggressive or worldly aspects within a Christian life?
Oh, good question. I um I think in terms of art, to me it's more a question of not this or that genre. Is it artful? And are you saying something interesting or significant or beautiful? Or sometimes it's okay to cover some, dark aspects of life. It's one thing to, there are a lot of amazing movies that are covering some dark periods, like Schindler's List, for example. It's a very dark movie, but it's not promoting the darkness. It's trying to highlight the darkness so that it's that we don't go there again, right? So so in art you can you could express shadows and things like, and then some with some aggression. Yeah, anger is a part of life. And sometimes we want to have the sense of power. If you think about even in the universe, there are some really powerful sounds, right? Of when well, I know you kind of need sound, and you need an atmosphere to have sound, but um, it seems. But you could imagine the power of a supernova and things like that. So the very fact that there would be powerful aspects in music, I don't have any problem with. And even classical music, you'll have some heavy aspects at times. If you look at like Verdi's Requiem, the beginning of his Dies Irae, it's pretty intense, right?
Yeah.
It's very metal, right? So, but in my mind, though, I think some metal music is just so aggressive all the time, and with it's just like it's too indulgent in anger and power all the time, and it's sort of disproportionate. It's not very artful. So in my mind, it's art is about balancing things, and um, that it's almost like if you really like a color, a certain color, you just paint everything that color. And like, and it's like, okay, it's a little too much, right? We need some nuance and contrast and balancing. Now, sometimes some music could be a little too subdued all the time, right? You need it. You need some dynamics, some a little bit of drama, right? And that's you have peaks and valleys within Gregorian chant and everything. You have all these kinds of things. So I do like some heavy aspects of music. I'm not a metalhead, but I grew up listening to heavy metal to some degree, so I can appreciate the good and more artful forms. Now, people will vary their opinions in terms of what's artful and not, but those are my own thoughts.
Yeah, that's incredible. I don't think it's a coincidence that when I was listening to the most metal, I was at my most kind of well, my younger years where I was a bit more radical thinking or had a bit more anger back then and stuff like that. Very much these days, I mean, the thing that I love about your answer essentially is balance.
Mhm.
That's great. I wasn't even thinking that, but you've taught me many things already. That is fantastic. And it represent for me, it coincides with life as well. So that's great. Um, okay, so my days are split between drumming and caring for children. It's kind of where I find the deepest joy and, as we were talking about before, discipline. So how do you see care for others as part of spiritual life or even as a creative practice?
Hmm. Yeah, I think with our faith, we see others as not just complex sets of chemicals, which they are, but as images of God. Now, we can be frustrating images of God to each other at times, right? Um, and we can be difficult to work with, and but we really, so it's a spiritual way of seeing, and when we really internalize it, and when we learn to pause and reverence the other as an image of God, no matter how they could be very bad people, they could be very difficult, but to look for the good, uh, and to see that, it's then you want to serve it. When you see the others as another self, to treat others as you would have them do unto others what you would have them to do unto you, right? It's seeing so if you realize you're a unique image of God, others are a unique image of God, um, and when you see that, and you have the gospel that talks about love one another as I have loved you, showing Christ's love. I mean, love just, it's kind of the nature of love to overflow. Um, so, this is something that we've seen in the Gospels. St. Thomas Aquinas is somebody that speaks about how love, this it kind of belongs to the nature. Love is diffusive of itself. There's something about love that is self-giving, that goes out of oneself to do good for another. And it all begins with God, right? He creates in order to share. out of goodness. He has no need of us, but it's an altruistic kind of move, right? To create the universe in order that other creatures who did not yet exist might come to know something of his love and goodness and beauty, right? So that right there, you have this act from the act of creation, this act of self-giving, and you see it all throughout the life of Christ, and he loved himself, or he not he loved himself, he loved us even unto death. Um, he loved us to the end, right? And that, this is Saint John he was the longest living apostle. And after what he experienced in Christ, he was the one that got to sort of think about and internalize it on this earth the most because, at the end of his life, after reflecting over what he experienced for so long, towards the end of his life, he comes to one great, profound, simple conclusion: God is love. Right? He's looking at the life of Christ and he sees it, like the insight. And it isn't Hallmark card love. It isn't like just sentimentalism. Um, and people have said before, God is loving, but not God is love. So that was the first time that had been said.
Yeah.
It's only with the coming of Christ that could have where he could have arrived at that conclusion. And it was coming from that insight was springing from his experience of Christ. Right. And so yeah, so it's when that's kind of our vocation, our call is to reflect God, just as his love overflows and does good to others, and helps perfect them. That's our model, right? That's how we're called to be, and each in our own unique way, right? And it's Satan that says, "No, I will not serve. I will not serve others." Right? I want to keep it all for myself. It's the ego, um, and so we're given an example and a counterexample. I mean, these days the devil can be very fashionable, but it really puzzles me. He's like, guys, you people don't know what you're dealing with. This is not good, right? People just want to be defiant and punk and all of this, and like, okay, you can, there's a way of you can be defiant and good.
Yes.
Defiant and evil is not good,
No.
you know.
It feels like there's a lot of kind of wolf in sheep's clothing almost in the modern day, if you know what I mean. It's a bit like it's easy to be tempted into something which is unknowingly not good, but
Mhm.
the people can live something and think that it isn't a bad thing, almost.
Right. Yeah.
Has your approach to Instagram changed since your very first post, which was obviously a year ago? And what have you learned about yourself, your audience, or the medium?
That's a good question. I never expected this to happen. To me, it's still a little bit surreal. And, you know, I had gotten away from drums for years. Not music, I've always loved music, but in large part, and would only practice on a pad every once in a while. And I was resisting getting a drum set because we try to live a very simple life. But we're all encouraged to have outlets. And I've always loved music. And well, I started connecting with a local Catholic artist, and then like, well, okay, I kind of need some drums to play on. So then I got a trap set, and I was like, and so we don't have a regular income that goes to us. We just have a monthly allowance. So it's the modest amount. It takes a long time to save up for something. So after a long time, I saved up for a trap set, right? And because it's a kind of and it sounds decent. The bass and snare drums are not great, but the toms are really cool. But it's still something to kind of play on and have fun with, right? So I saved up for that, and I had some cymbals that I had. I had a snare, but that's all I really had, not a full set. So, but now I have toms and something to have the kick pedal on it. Um, so so then I was practicing and that for a while, having fun and kind of getting back into things. But then I was playing more live recently, at various times, and I was thinking, well, I really need some real drums. And so through donations, I wanted, sometimes people have all these accusations online, but there was no church funds used for any of this. I would never do that, right? It's not the church funds is not for my hobby. So it's all basically saving up monthly allowances or donations from others. And now, you know, got some it's pretty cool now. I get free cymbals and free sticks, free heads, and not any drums yet. But I don't really need the drums. I have just a Yamaha Stage Custom, which is
I
it's
think they're beautiful.
yeah, it's a lower it's a good quality lower end set, but it sounds really good. And I don't really need much. I'm not a professional drummer, right?
But
And so
you do yourself a disservice there. I mean, you say you're not professional, you're not professional. I mean, you are getting now sent products and gear, I guess. So, you're doing something whereby you are definitely, in my eyes, a professional. And also, I'd just like to say very quickly, the stage custom, I gave it a chef's kiss because that is one of the most unbelievable sounding lower end kits I've ever heard, and I'm tempted just to get one.
yes. And what I love about it too is you can buy individual drums. So if you can't afford the whole set, if you just want to add a drum or something like that, you can just buy one drum, which with most sets you can't do that.
Mm.
So it's great. You can just buy a tom, you can just buy a floor tom or a kick. So that's saved up for a long time for a kick, and my parents donated the toms. I already had a snare from years ago. So yeah, so just over time, I built it up. And now with the things that I get, there's no like contract or deal. I don't have to go and promote. It's more like goodwill. They'll send me stuff, and I'm glad to use it. There's no. It's kind of yeah. With it, that's what I love about it. If it was a contract, I'm like I don't think I could do that as a religious, And I have to be about one thing, that's promoting God. I can't say, follow Christ and buy a blank blank symbol, right? There's a conflict of interest there, right? So I have to
Yeah.
um but yeah, so that's it's but yeah, it's I'm very blessed. I did, it's funny because on my day off before all this happened, I liked experimenting with various things, but it's usually me with no one else around, no one else caring. And that was fine with me, I just having fun on my own. But now I'm just kind of floored that all these people over the world kind of like what I do. And I never anticipated that. And so, yeah, and I was trying to figure out what to do with it because it's like, well, it started to take off. So I was like, well, might as well keep on going. And then I don't know, I'm just having fun with it, being creative. Um, and trying to just try, I try to obviously through the comments, I try to offer reflections on faith, but I'm also cognizant that not everybody, there are people of different faiths and religions out there and different philosophies. And so I'll get I'll maybe share something of our faith, for them to think about, but I'll also sometimes share various thoughts on virtues or other things like that that they could maybe appreciate um, without necessarily subscribing. I mean, I'm hoping to kind of witness and draw people to our faith, but people are in a different place, right? So I try to, think about how wherever people's background that they could appreciate something like that too, and
I
just trying
think
to be positive, right, and support. I like supporting and collaborating with various people, and I don't charge for anything I do, like with collaborations, because I know how difficult it is to make any music these days. So I don't depend on it, and I'm happy to just kind of contribute my services to help them and to highlight, other good things that other people are doing.
couple of points from that I just want to make is I think that's one of the reasons I was initially drawn to your Instagram, not only your musicality and playability and all the amazing rhythms, it was the humility and the fact that you've just mentioned it's fun. And you've not changed it. It's not like, you saw it kind of doing well and you thought, well, what do I do with this now? But you stressed, well, just have fun, keep doing it because that's where it began. And I think you're seen from as far as I can tell online. You are seen as a very cool father from people that are, atheist, for example, and they might have no interest in becoming theist, and but they respect you, and I think that's one of the major things separate to the playing that I've noticed the most. I notice a lot of people get discouragement online and attract hate, etc. But I don't think you ever. I mean, obviously you're gonna get some negative vibes, but I don't think you ever could. And I just wanted to point that out to you because it was one of the marvels of your page.
Well, thanks. I have received a good number, like it's a small minority of comments, but stuff that is really nasty and really inappropriate. So, if it's beyond the pale, if it's inappropriate, I might just delete it. But if it's really, really nasty stuff, I'll just block the person because it's just like there should be consequences for something like that, and people need to, yeah. So. But most people are at least in the realm of acceptability, right? And some, most are pretty positive. But and I don't try to control comments for the most part unless they're kind of beyond the pale. So I like to allow people to, kind of say what they want. I might not agree with everything, right? But yeah, I want to be, and it's a good human connection. Sometimes there are a lot of caricatures and, about the church and Christians and things like that. And some of it, I mean, I wouldn't say it's warranted. Caricatures are never warranted, but um, yeah, there are scandals, there are really bad examples, but it's like anything, like in the church, you have saints and sinners and everything in between. And anywhere you go, any organization, you're going to have your outstanding members, your really horrible members, and then mediocre members, right? In terms of quality of work, let a work company or something like that. So sometimes people, because they just get these like very bigoted notions, they just whitewash a complete group, and that can that's I get a lot of that. I mean, it's again small minority of comments, but where there's deep bigotry, right? And people don't realize it; they don't even see it as bigotry, but it's pretty nasty. I just pray for those people. I don't try to highlight it. I've seen people where, everybody gets hate comments, right? And haters, but I don't try to give them attention because then you're just adding fuel to the fire. And I don't like it when people complain about all the negative stuff they're getting. In my mind, there's just the best way just to ignore it, right? So ignore it, pray for them. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree. It's something which I've definitely experienced myself online. I've been on since about 2006 doing YouTube videos before any money, YouTube obviously is a platform now where there's some serious money to be made with the millions of followers and stuff. And that wasn't available then. I literally started and I'm still doing it for the same reason that I began as a you. And I love every minute of it. But I've been through certainly a lot of negative vibes, a lot of kind of attacks, and I'm the same. I think the more you feed it or the more you respond, the more it builds, and then you attract it. So I think you better, yeah. I love the way that you deal with that, and they are obviously, oops, sorry about that. They are obviously going to be learning in their life at some point anyway. So you leave them to it and let them learn. I believe.
Right.
What would you say to someone right now who feels spiritually dry or stuck, especially someone who's kind of lost maybe the creative spark?
The creative spark. That's a good question. I think, I'm just thinking out loud, but watching good drummers can help, because there's so many amazing drummers out there and you can get inspiration from. Now, yes, you can feel discouraged. Oh, I can't do that. But if you look at it more like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, my big inspirations, I realize like that's just, there's always the temptation. I quit, right? When you see Weckl play or when you see my favorite drummer is Dana Hawkins. And a lot of times I'm like, okay, I just quit, right? And but no, it's good to rejoice, not to like that's awesome that they have that gift and they're playing it well. And let me not get discouraged, but let me be happy for them. But also, is there something there that I can take? I listen to Tony Williams or Billy Cobham or Terry Bozzio or Max Roach or Matt Garstka or like I might not be able to, yes, I might not be able to touch them, with on various levels, but I can take something. So a lot of these drummers, I've taken a little bit from a lot of drummers. I could never do, what they did and the way they did it for so many of them. But I mean, none of us can, but that's okay. We all have our unique voice. And people talk about you developing a unique voice. In the midst of all of this, I kind of, it's funny because I just have, I've almost developed like my own voice, and I didn't really think about doing it, but it's just everybody has their own personality and instincts. And when practice and allow those to come out, there are all kinds of interesting things that can come out. So I do a lot of things with, you know, I like groovy beats. I love stuff with cowbells and stacks. A lot of times you'll
I've
see
noticed. It's amazing.
almost every video that I have has a cowbell and a stack. So usually you have cowbells, right? Where it's more Latin and no stacks, or you have stacks and no cowbells, right? So sometimes they go together, but that's just something. And then just the way I have a lot of muted drums because I like to control the sound, and I'm always trying to think about tuning the kit, how it all is going to sound good together, and the interrelationship. Um, and so I find like a lot of drummers, that I've seen, not like the greats, but they're very often they just get a drum set. They don't put a lot of time into really getting to honing that sound. And they're hitting and they're doing okay, but it's like it makes a big difference if you really work on the sound and think about what kind of sound, what are you trying to communicate, and it's going to change in every room. The drums are like the hardest thing to control the sound for.
Yeah.
You get it to sound perfectly in one room, you move it to the next, and it's like you got to change it again, or you go outside, or then you mic it up, and it's like, and there's nothing so complex as a drum set with all the mics and trying to, mix all that. That's beyond me. So that's why it's just easier for me to just to hold up a cell phone, right? And then, um,
Is that what the audio comes from then?
yes, whenever I'm in the church hall, it's just a cell phone. Um, so sometimes I'm trying different angles, not just for a visual difference, but because a certain beat might sound better um, on one side of the kit versus another side of the kit. So I have to listen back and see what sounds good. But yeah, so I have to do my own mixing, and sometimes if I listen back, I'm like, oh, that's not loud enough or that's not quiet enough, then I'll have to adjust my playing so that, comes across in the video better. Um, but when I go into the studio, there's a studio close by. There's a devout Catholic family, and the husband and father basically converted his garage into a recording studio. And so he gives me a break when I go up there. And now various people that I collaborate with, they often will pay for the studio time. So they're not paying me because I won't take any money from them. But insofar as I can do something and support it and have the time, but they're at least paying for the studio time so that I don't have to save up my monthly allowances for that or as much. I might still do some of that, but so every few months I go into the studio and then we can work on, better quality things, like turtle taps. That's something I really enjoy, you know, collaborate.
Absolutely love that as well. I was watching it earlier on.
Oh, cool. Yeah. There's a
Are they all
funny,
based close to you? Sorry. Are they in Philly?
no, no, they're all far away. So the story behind that is pretty funny. So I love Chan. I don't know if you're familiar with Chan, the band.
I'm
They,
not. I'm not too sure.
okay, check them out. It's amazing music.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite bands, but they fizzled out, unfortunately. And I was looking for something similar that I could listen to. And I discovered this guy, Waximilian, very cool guitar player in Austria. And so when I first joined Instagram, I didn't have my name on the account, right? I didn't even know how it really worked. And before I posted anything, I saw that you could DM people. I didn't even know what DM meant, but I saw you could send a personal message to somebody. So I like, oh wow, I can actually send a message to Waximilian. I love his guitar playing and his music, and very complex. So, and most of his albums have programmed drums. You can kind of understand why because it's so complex. But so I reached out to him before all this happened and just all I told him was I'm a drummer in Philly and I love his music, but you need real drums on your with your music. And I would love if you're open, I said, I would love to contribute, take one or two tracks. If you send it to me, I'll contribute drums. I'll send it back to you. If you like, great. If not, forget it, right? And he was open to it. He had no idea who I was.
That's incredible of him as well.
Yeah, so then so I chose two songs, The Rabbit Hole, which was the simplest of the song. It still has its own complexity, but in terms of his songs on his albums, it was maybe the least complex, but very catchy and cool. And then Pawn Island, which was one of the more complex ones. So when I sent the drums with a video when I started to go viral, then I reached back out to him and said, "By the way, this is me. I happen to be a Catholic priest."
What was his reaction?
He's like, "Oh, that's cool, right? It's like whatever, right? It's whatever." Um, so pretty wild. So and then he told me though that the rabbit hole he didn't actually write or play on. He said it's his friend Turtle, that's his nickname, in California. And he said, so Wax a Million is it's his friend. So he wanted to feature his song on his album because he loved the song. And he just added like orchestral sounds, programmed orchestral sounds to that track, which sound great. And so he put me in touch with Turtle. So there's this guy in California, a guitar player who has no idea who I am. And all of a sudden one day he gets a message of this guy in a white robe playing drums to his song. Like, what is this? He's like, how did you find me? And like, why are you playing drums to my song? And he thought it was cool. So, and we've been collaborating since. So, um, and I love his music. It's a little easier to play his songs. They still have, there's still take work and they have their own complexity, but not quite as complex as Wax a Million. Um, but yeah, and then when I sent Pawn Island to Wax, he liked it, and that to me that's like I never dreamed I'd be playing drums to one of my favorite artists' song. To me, it was just like I can't believe this is all happening, and that's the Pawn Island. I don't know if you saw that video. Oh yeah, you saw that
Yeah,
video.
yeah,
It's the hardest song I've ever played.
yeah. You did a good job.
Oh, thanks.
You did a very good job.
But I don't know. I don't know if he had a regular drummer. I know he plays live with drummers, but I don't know how they would learn all those songs and all the intricacies. I mean, just learning one song of his is a huge work. To learn if you were to learn all of them and just nail them all every time, I couldn't imagine the work you'd have to put into and like internalizing and not just like following music, music notes on a page. But anyways, I thought that was pretty coul. I'm trying to work on another, every once in a while I can maybe try a Wax song, but it's I can only do that every once in a while because it's so complex. It takes so much work. But with Turtle, it's a little easier to do regular collaboration. So, and I love just clean guitar, melodic, interesting, um, fusion like. I love that kind of sound. And so um, that's what I love. Yeah.
I think actually you probably would be able to learn a lot of the songs. I think maybe given the time that you've got and you can still learn that one, I think you'd be all right in a day to day, if it was your profession. I think sometimes it's just thinking, how would I fit this in?
Yeah. Perhaps it would take a lot of time. Every song would take a lot of time, but I love it. It's not just complex for its own sake. It's very musical. Um, and when I was younger, I loved learning. I was exposed to so many different types of music, different world music traditions, Brazilian, Japanese, African, and I really enjoyed learning all of those. And I, learned a little about, jazz and drumline and drum set and rock and metal and funk and all of these things. And I love it all. But I always found myself never being able to just devote myself to just one genre. To me, it's like so limiting. I liked it all. So that's why I've always been drawn to fusion and prog and things like that because it really draws upon all of these things together. And you can have really groovy elements to it, but it can be very experimental and colors and like the variety, and you can draw upon so many different things, right? So I've always really loved fusion. And when I was younger, like at least the people that I knew, no one else was really into that. And so I just couldn't fit. I just couldn't fit into I'm just a jazzer or I'm just a rock guy. It was like but it's funny, but now years later with Instagram, now fusion is really popular in terms of like what the videos that get out there. It's not that the fusion players are making a lot of money, but generally speaking, I mean, you have some prog groups that are, right? But But a lot of people are listening to it or and into it and love that. So to me, it's kind of interesting. The thing that I've always loved that I couldn't really connect with many people on now is hugely popular, and uh, and I think it's pretty cool.
I think it's amazing. I think there's many great, amazing attributes about social media and the internet simply because everybody can talk about things, and in one respect, that's fantastic. And obviously, there's downsides to it. But I just want to say that I can absolutely tell that you're very open-minded with regards to music because it shines through, not just in your playing, but in the way that you're passionate and intertwine it with the spirituality, but also the fact that it comes out in your playing as well. You know, you can sense that you've studied many different styles, arts, people, genres. And for me, as I get older, I'm hoping that I'm getting wiser. It kind of that sort of stuff stands out to me more than the drums of yesteryear when I was learning it. And what you were saying about you're not just interested in one genre. I was very much that when I was in my early 20s. It was just like metal, 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 metal. And in the end, I kind of thought, well, I'm not really getting anywhere with regards to my personal musical identity. And I realized I was just going, oh, that's him from, that's Joey Jordison. That's Richard Christie. Yeah, that's Gene Hoglan, and it was like, right, who am I going to be today? Oh, I'm going to be but with you, it's kind of like you say, you've developed it well, like I'm saying, I don't think you said this, but it's developing everything and that open-mindedness to create something which is so for me so authentic and you probably don't see it like this, but from an outsider that's not playing it's authentic and you've got your own personal stamp and identity on it.
Well, thanks. I try.
Benedictus Domini,
Benedictus
Benedictus
S
S
Domine.
Domine. I got that. I was trying to remember all. I've not written it down or anything. Obviously, I can't really write down phonetics, but I was trying to remember at the end. I did my best. But thank you for sharing your wisdom. And obviously, everybody that's watching this, make sure that you go and follow at
Benedictus S Domine.
which is Benedictusesdomine. I'm going to put that on the screen on Instagram. Check out the full conversation on YouTube. And what I'm going to say is grace and groove to you all. Thank you so much, Father Hyacinth.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay, God bless you, Gareth.